Rushing to work from a small suburban town, Angel never talked much about where he worked. He did it because for most people, the morgue seemed like a sinister and mysterious place. Angel had heard from his colleague, the orderly Casper, that he had to answer the most elaborate questions from his acquaintances. But what really worries them the most, Angel, is how we eat. They think that the morgue staff eats almost right at their workstations. And what am I supposed to say? We prioritize safety and disinfection above all. Although, of course, they want to hear something completely different. Angel smiled. He had heard such scary stories many times before. People tended to invent nonsense when something was beyond their understanding. Most of the time, Angel took the train to work. And why not? It's quite convenient. The wheels clatter along, and you look out the window or read a book. It would have been fine if it weren't for his neighbor Leon, who was very concerned that he knew too little about Angel. The guy had moved to the town not long ago, right after the death of his grandmother, Camila. He didn't talk much about himself and, in a sense, became a puzzle for Angel's neighbors. I have a feeling, Sophia, he's not telling us something. He always walks so neat, and his palm is soft, well-groomed, but a working man can't have such a palm. Leon said to his wife over breakfast. Maybe he's some kind of businessman? You know, sitting in an office, pressing buttons on a computer, Sophia suggested. But Leon just shook his head. He didn't believe Angel was a businessman. And he didn't seem like a rich neighbor at all. Those wealthy folks drive around in imported cars, and this one takes the train. No, something else was going on here. But what? It was hard to figure out for now. But time would tell. Angel didn't know what his neighbors thought, and he just worked despite everything. Today wasn't starting well. First, someone's wallet was stolen on the train, and there was a commotion throughout the carriage. Unfortunately, they didn't catch the thief. And how could they when the crowd was so thick? Because of this delay, Angel almost arrived late for work. On one hand, it wasn't a big deal. The production wouldn't stop without him at the machine, but try explaining that to the bosses. But that wasn't the end of the unpleasantness. As soon as Angel entered the courtyard of the city morgue, he was called out by Martin, the janitor. Good morning, Angel. So, will you be working alone again today? Your partner took another day off. The orderly stopped and looked at the elderly man in surprise. Was he kidding? Casper had already taken his 5th day off this month, and he always needed something. Rushing off to a wedding one time, a funeral the next. And now where? Picking up his wife from the maternity ward? But first, it wouldn't hurt to actually get a wife. Everyone knew that Casper was an incurable bachelor. Martin added after a while. Yeah, Casper won't be here. Heard it myself. He called in to take a guard duty shift, city style. He's always short on cash for his mobile. Angel sighed sadly. Well, I guess I'll have to manage on my own. If anything, the pathologist will help. The main thing is not to let the workload overwhelm me. The janitor nodded sympathetically, then added. Listen, Angel, there's this thing. I don't know where to start. A dog showed up at my place recently. I'm keeping him in the utility room. So Nicholas doesn't see him. You know, he can't stand dogs. They say he got scared by a dog as a kid. So ever since then, whenever he gets nervous, he starts stammering. And the dog's a good one. Don't get me wrong, I know my dogs. I served in the border guards, after all. True, we had German shepherds, but that's beside the point. Maybe you could take him in, huh? Well, you live in a private sector, don't you? And I just don't have room in my one bedroom. Angel thought it over. A dog, that's actually nice. Wanted one for a while now. A puppy would have been better, but if he's smart, why not take him? An adult won't cause trouble, and he'll serve as some sort of guard. Yeah, I'm fine with it, Martin, but where's he hiding? Asked the orderly. The janitor smiled mysteriously and quietly whistled. In the next moment, a black wet nose appeared from around the corner of the building. And a second later, a fairly large dog was already flying at full speed towards the janitor who had taken him in. I named him Pirate. You see that black spot under his eye, just like pirates have. But I think he's not here by chance. Looks like his owner died, and the poor guy is still waiting for him. Remember, 3 days ago they buried a retired doctor, a surgeon, I think. I have a feeling this dog belongs to him. When he saw the coffin with his body in the hearse, he started whimpering so sadly, it broke my heart, explained the janitor as he began to pet the dog. Angel smiled and gave Pirate a pat on the neck, realizing that he would probably end up keeping him. Otherwise, the boss would definitely chase the dog away or call animal control. And they wouldn't be gentle about it. They'd take him to a shelter, which wasn't pleasant at all. Shelters in movies are nice places, but in reality, they're prisons for animals, to say the least. All right, Martin, I'll be going now. I'm almost late as it is. Nicholas will be on my case if I don't hurry. I'll pick up Pirate after work, he said, then hurried towards the morgue building. The janitor watched him go with a smile. Angel's a good man. He cares about his work. Not like his partner. All he thinks about is his personal affairs. One moment he's with one girl, the next with another, and where does he find them all? As Angel stepped over the threshold of the morgue, he almost bumped into the boss. You're late? Today's going to be quite busy, let me tell you, said the boss. Sorry, Nicholas, it was an accident. Someone's wallet was stolen on the train. So, I'm a bit late because of that. Angel tried to smooth over the awkward situation. The boss frowned, but didn't press further with Angel. After all, they didn't want to lose a responsible orderly. All right, it's no big deal. Just be careful with the janitor, okay? He's a former inmate or something. Go figure out what he did and why he was in jail. Maybe he's just a common embezzler, or maybe he has a dark past. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They brought a body this morning. A wealthy woman, it seems. She had dinner at a restaurant yesterday and didn't make it until dawn. How didn't she make it? Asked Angel. Nicholas frowned. What do you mean, didn't make it? You're like a kid sometimes. Where do you work? In the morgue or in a ballroom dance club? She died, that is. The restaurant management has already been summoned for questioning, and the place is closed until further notice. But that's not our concern. The main thing is to send this rich lady off. Her husband, Donald, is here if anything. He'll explain everything to you. Angel looked at the boss in surprise. Since when did outsiders manage what was happening in the morgue? But Nicholas didn't feel the need to explain anything and added, oh, and this. If you do everything right, he promised a bonus. But not through accounting, of course, more like under the table, in cash, so to speak. Oh, and I almost forgot. The autopsy has already been done, so your job is small. Just prepare the paperwork and hand over the body to the funeral service. Angel nodded once again, surprised at how quickly everything was happening. What's going on? The woman barely died, and everything is already ready for the funeral? It's strange. Usually, it's completely different. But money often works miracles. And just like that, it opens any doors, so anything can happen in life. After changing into his work uniform, Angel hurried to the room for handing out bodies. On the pedestal was an expensive lacquered coffin, confirming once again the client's high-paying ability. Angel approached closer and immediately heard an unpleasant, hoarse male voice behind him. "You're the orderly, right?" Angel turned around. "Yeah, orderly, what's up?" The businessman in front of him looked no more than 30. A protruding belly, blue circles under his eyes, and a stale hangover breath spoke for themselves. Yesterday, this wealthy man had a very eventful evening, or maybe even night. "So, buddy, listen to me carefully. Your job is simple. Do everything right, and you'll get a bonus. In short, don't peek into the coffin and don't change the clothes. Laura's already dressed. And everything's tip-top. The pathologist and I have sorted everything out with yours. Just wait for the funeral service and do everything right. As for me, I gotta go. Got things to do at the cemetery. There's our own kind of guard there, everyone gets a piece. They all want their share, you know," summed up Donald their brief conversation. Angel nodded in agreement. At that moment, he was ready to agree to anything just to get rid of this cheeky rich guy as soon as possible. Seeing the client off, the orderly got down to business. Laura, 26 years old. Cause of death: anaphylactic shock resulting from a food allergy, Angel read aloud. It seemed straightforward. Not a task, but a fairy tale. When did orderlies ever have no work when they conducted autopsies and dressed bodies? And the pathologist, Stephen, he was quite heavy to lift. But here he volunteered to help. It all seemed so strange. Angel shook his head. Come on, stop it. Why look for discrepancies where there are none? Everything seems fine. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a cellophane bag lying in the corner. Usually, this is how the funeral service staff sold clothes for the deceased. Dresses, pants, and even shoes, actually. A new set lay untouched. The packaging hadn't even been opened. What's this all about? Did the rich guy lie? He said they dressed his wife together with the pathologist, but the dress is untouched, Angel whispered to himself. The boy's suspicions grew stronger. This all looked too strange. Don't peek into the coffin, don't touch the clothes. What kind of secrets were these? Angel looked at the lacquered coffin, feeling an irresistible desire to peek inside. Though, on the other hand, what would he actually see there? He'd been working in the morgue for quite some time. Whether he looked or not, the deceased couldn't be helped. All that was left was to send her off properly. That's what funeral services were for. Angel stood opposite the coffin, still unable to decide whether to lift the massive lid and look inside. The funeral service staff were due to arrive any minute, so there was no time for contemplation. Angel cautiously unlocked the hidden latch mechanism and struggled to lift the heavy lid. What he saw made him feel sick. No, this just can't be. The orderly recoiled, leaving the lid open. Firstly, Angel immediately realized that the usual concealment in such cases had not been carried out. This was evidenced by the evening dress in which the deceased was dressed. Such blatant lies from the rich man and the pathologist shocked Angel to the core. But the most astonishing thing was not even that, but the barely noticeable blush on the deceased's cheeks. The orderly approached the coffin closely and gently touched the girl's wrist with his finger. In that moment, a jolt shot through Angel. The skin was warm, like that of a living person. Oh my God, what's happening here? Is this not a dream? Angel whispered. The realization of the horrifying truth engulfed him. Still fearing his own suspicions, the orderly leaned over the girl's mouth and distinctly felt her breath against his cheek. This definitely couldn't be an illusion. And Angel, with his knowledge in the medical field, albeit as a morgue orderly, but having graduated from medical school with honors, knew that something was terribly wrong. Realizing that action was needed immediately, Angel decided to call an ambulance. After all, he wasn't particularly skilled in resuscitation matters to take such responsibility upon himself. But as he was about to leave the room, the deceased lying in the coffin let out a faint groan. Angel rushed to the pedestal and almost immediately noticed that Laura's skin was turning blue from suffocation. The orderly acted almost automatically. First, he turned the girl on her side to clear her lungs of accumulated fluid, and then he began simple resuscitation maneuvers consisting of indirect heart massage. At that moment, Angel wasn't sure what exactly caused the suffocation and anaphylactic shock. But he had no doubt that a criminal offense had occurred within the walls of the morgue. When the girl finally breathed more evenly and opened her eyes, the young orderly's body was shaking violently. Partly, it was due to the worry that his actions wouldn't succeed and Laura might die again. This time, for real. Despite confirming that she was alive, Angel still called for an ambulance. Better safe than sorry. Let the doctors keep an eye on her. Who knows, maybe there's still some toxin left in her blood. Needless to say, Nicholas was shocked when journalists from all over the district swarmed to the morgue building like bees to honey. And how did they find out? Those rats. What could he say? That an influential businessman asked him for help during a heartfelt phone conversation. And not only did he ask, but he also unequivocally promised to turn everything into gold, whatever he could reach. Who would refuse such an offer? Especially when your only son is turning into a good-for-nothing and a layabout. Look, just a month ago, they took out a car loan. All for their beloved son. Use it, Sam, just remember your father's kindness. But where's that now? Got into a drunk driving accident. Wrecked the car. God, if it was just a car, it could have been fixed, no problem. But he hit the luxury car of some very influential people. Everything's topsy-turvy. Those thugs quickly set a price that makes the morgue donor-worthy. So Sam got into trouble. And along with him, Nicholas. So when wealthy Donald offered his services to solve the problem, the boss didn't refuse. He hadn't completely lost his mind yet. Who would refuse such an offer? Nicholas quickly struck a deal with the pathologist Stephen. Stephen, remember you wanted to buy Dad a new wheelchair? Well, here's your chance. But help me out with one delicate matter. Getting Stephen's agreement, the boss smiled happily. Well, everything went without a hitch. And there was Angel, always sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Well, the wealthy guy was a bit of a nut too. What was he thinking? Wanting to bury someone alive? Or maybe he just didn't know. Now they'll have to clean up the mess. And they might even be called in for questioning. That's what Nicholas was thinking, while Angel was busy with his most ordinary task. After all, a morgue orderly, no one from the street can do your job for you. Despite the commotion surrounding Laura's resurrection, the incident didn't affect Angel himself in any way. Moreover, the boss didn't even remember their tacit agreement, as if the discussions about the bonus had never happened. But Angel wasn't upset. It's the end of the shift, and now he'll go home with Pirate. What could be better? Let the boss and the pathologist deal with all these intrigues with resurrected rich folks. As soon as Angel stepped out of the morgue building, the janitor approached him, holding a dog on a leash. "Here's a gift for you, Angel. Paid for it out of my own pocket. And a muzzle too. Pirate is a good dog, but people get worried, you know. They might not let him on the bus or train. Who knows, he might snap at someone. Then you'll have a real hassle." "Thanks, Martine, it's a nice gift. Can I ask, though, what landed you in prison?" Angel asked, feeling a bit embarrassed. The janitor's expression darkened. Seems like the boss already sang my tune. He wasn't too keen on hiring me with a record, even though I've been living an honest life for a long time now. Ended up in prison. For a job. At my age. You see, Angel, I wasn't always swinging a broom. I used to be a tractor driver, a respected man. But then, like my granddaughter, a medical school student, a rich kid hit her at a crosswalk, and my life turned upside down. Angel patted the impatiently dancing dog. "I'm sorry to hear that, Martine." The janitor shook his head. "My Camila is alive, Angel, alive. Just disabled now. They caught that scumbag, of course. He tried to wriggle out, but the cameras helped. You see, they keep an eye on everything. And he, the little darling, got caught. Went to court, and when they acquitted him, I was beside myself. Found that bastard and wanted to run him over with a tractor. My hand shook. I only dinged his foreign car. Spared the scoundrel. And they gave me 5 years. Could have been more, but they considered my merits. I was in the war, you know, Angel. The one in the mountains. Got 2 wounds, a concussion. That's how it is. And in my old age, you see, I became a convict." Angel looked at the elderly janitor with sympathy. "You're not alone in this, Martine. It could happen to anyone." He smiled. "But don't defend me, Angel. I'm guilty, couldn't control myself. Wanted to hurt someone. So how am I any better than him? I'm not. Not at all. Anyway, enough of singing my praises. How are you getting home? Taking the bus or waiting for the train?" "I think I'll take the bus. Waiting for the train takes too long, and I want to show Pirate his new home as soon as possible." Martine perked up noticeably. "Taking the bus, huh? Then do me a favor and don't hesitate. There's a big kiosk at the bus station, even has baked goods. My granddaughter works there. Tell her I sent you. She'll wrap some pastries for you and Pirate. You know how delicious her baking is? Oh, you'll love it." Angel raised an eyebrow in surprise. "But how is she working? I mean, isn't Camila?" The janitor waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, say it plain, without all the fancy talk. My Camila is disabled, I won't deny that. But what's she supposed to do now? Sit at home for 7 days? That's not her style. Sure, she can't stand at the stove, but she can handle the fillings, serve ready-made products through the window, no problem. So don't forget, stop by when you get the chance. She's been working there for 3 months already. Saving up for an operation. They promised her a quota, but it's taking forever. But I chip in with every pinch and penny I have, I don't hold back." "All right, I'll definitely stop by." Angel smiled and led Pirate towards the exit of the yard. Passers-by watched with curiosity as the tall, handsome guy walked alongside a large dog. Angel was in a good mood. He had saved a good man in the morning and was now heading home. But not alone this time, with a 4-legged friend. He found the pavilion where Camilo worked quite quickly. But what led him to it? Honestly, Angel was drawn to it by a divine aroma that hung in the air like a ghost, its flesh a mixture of the most appetizing smells. The most delicious fresh pastries. Rolls, pies with various fillings, pancakes. All familiar and beloved since childhood. Since Martine had already given Camila directions to the guy with the dog, she eagerly handed the guest a bag of still hot pastries. Hey. Here, take it. I only put in a little. So you and Pirate can try the whole assortment. Hi, Camila. Wow, that's a lot. Are you sure you don't mind? Angel asked, concerned. The girl smiled and added, No, take it. Besides our salary, the owner gives us pastries every day, so don't even think about it. Angel was about to say goodbye when shouts were heard from the side of the bus station square. Get him. Hold the thief. There he is. Ah, you clumsy oaf, I'll get you. Angel looked around and almost immediately saw a 7-year-old boy being chased by a fruit vendor. In the boy's hands was an apple, small, the size of a chicken egg. Hey, kid, what are you looking at? Grab that thief, the vendor shouted, panting from the fast chase. But Angel not only didn't detain the boy, but also stood in the path of the fat man, causing him to fall to the ground. The vendor was about to unleash a furious tirade, but upon seeing Pirate's rage reflected in the dog's eyes, he noticeably backed down and walked back to his stall. Oh, so now you're all defenders, huh? Let's see how you sing when this thief empties your pockets, he muttered. Pirate growled deeply and bristled menacingly. Despite wearing a muzzle, the dog could still cause a lot of trouble for the vendor. And what kind of trouble? Thanks, mister. You're a real friend. Hey, are you from an orphanage, by any chance? 'Cause we're taught to help others there. Just like you did, the boy asked, peeking out from behind Angel's back. The janitor smiled. Nah, I had a mom and dad. They died, though, on a geological expedition. Their helicopter got caught in a storm. Crashed right in the middle of a slope, he explained. My grandma raised me, and my grandpa too. I'm Angel. What's your name? The orphan looked at the guy skeptically before responding. Robin, mister. Robin. Nice to meet you, Robin. Hang on, I'll get you some food right now. Camila, please get another bag ready, and I'll pay for it. But first, I'll buy the boy some fruit, so he won't resort to stealing, Angel instructed, heading towards the food stalls. Deliberately avoiding the vendor who had chased the boy just minutes ago, Angel ordered a full bag of fruit for Robin. After buying Robin a bag full of fruit, Angel returned to the pavilion where he had already devoured one pastry and started on another. Camila smiled at the boy through the partially open door of the storeroom. Angel handed her the money and, patting Robin on the shoulder, glanced at the watch on his wrist. Wow! I need to catch the bus. Otherwise, I'll have to wait a whole hour for the next one. All right, no goodbyes then. Bye, Camila. Robin, here's 5 for you. All right, I'm off. All right, Uncle Angel. Thank you so much, you're a real friend. I'll tell my buddies about you, boast about it, the boy called after him. Luckily, the bus hadn't left yet. Angel walked to the back of the bus, where passengers were usually allowed to ride with pets. This way, he wouldn't disturb the other passengers and would provide comfortable conditions for Pirate. Since there was a ticket inspector on the bus today, Angel immediately reached for his wallet. The passengers visibly perked up, preparing to pay their fares. After the bus started moving, the hefty ticket inspector got up and began collecting fares. She behaved quite confidently and arrogantly, as one does when they're sure of their actions. Gradually making her way towards the back of the bus, the inspector finally reached Angel. Eyeing him up and down, she decided to flex her authority. "Do you know that dogs aren't allowed on the bus, young man?" she said. Angel looked at her in surprise. "Why not?" he asked. "He's on a leash, wearing a muzzle. I'll pay for his fare just like a regular passenger." The woman frowned. "Well, I couldn't care less about your leashes and muzzles. You and your dog have no business on this bus. Either get rid of the dog or walk home with him. What kind of nonsense is this, bringing an animal on the bus? Couldn't you think of anything better? Use your head." Angel felt like he couldn't argue with the persistent inspector. What could he say when this woman represented authority? "Listen, but it's the same. Pirate and I have a long way to go. I'll even pay a fine if necessary." "Here, I have the money," Angel offered. This prompted the dog sitting next to him to growl deeply. "A fine? Why would I need your fine? When this beast could potentially be dangerous to the passengers? Now get out of here before I call the police," the inspector snapped. At that moment, Angel realized that he would probably have to walk home. She had caused such a commotion that the driver had to stop the bus in the middle of the road and open the doors. "Let's go, pirate. Looks like we're not welcome here," Angel whispered regretfully and headed towards the door. The dog obediently followed him. Thanks to the insufferable ticket inspector, they would now have to walk several kilometers. However, a walk in the fresh air was never redundant in such situations. Letting Pirate off the leash, Angel walked along the shoulder of the road, digesting everything that had happened to him that day. To his joy, the dog behaved calmly and paid no attention to the passing cars. Smart as a whip, thought Angel with a smile. Unbeknownst to himself, the young man delved into anxious memories rooted in his past. His childhood was spent in the countryside, in the home of his late grandmother Camila. Angel's grandfather had worked as a mechanic for as long as he could remember, whether in his younger years or during retirement, while his grandmother took care of the household. Chickens, geese, cows, sheep, and even the old horse Countess. She managed everything, trying not to distract her husband from his work. Angel became everything to his grandmother. She tried to spoil him and help him in every endeavor. Angel loved his grandmother and reciprocated her affection. And everything would have been fine if it weren't for the fact that from birth the boy had a broad frame, which made him seem a bit larger than his peers in his childhood years. Calling him fat would be unfair to Angel. He was more husky, but he wasn't to blame for that, was he? Unfortunately, his peers thought differently. From the 3rd grade onwards, they teased him as a fatty and a chunk. Angel would get nervous, get into fights, but it was all in vain. To everyone else, he remained a fatty who would never catch up to anyone, meaning they could easily fend him off without risking getting caught. Understanding her grandson's condition, his grandmother tried to support him and instill confidence in his own abilities. "Don't be sad, grandson, this too shall pass. You just turned out big like your father. Soon you'll stretch out, and the plumpness will go away, and don't listen to those empty-headed fools. You know the saying, dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. It's still hurtful, Grandma. Why are they picking on me? I haven't done anything wrong," Angel said with a tone of hurt. His grandmother could only shake her head. "If only I had your problems, grandson." Time went by, and Angel still couldn't lose weight. To this end, he even joined the local wrestling club, where he trained to exhaustion. Often walking home after practice, he would look up at the star-filled sky and make wishes when one of them fell like a meteorite. Grandma turned out to be right. When Angel finished school, his plumpness disappeared on its own, as if it had never been there. However, before that, he had to endure many unpleasant episodes related to school and prom. The thing was, no one wanted to go to the school event with Angel. Because of this, he became thoroughly disillusioned with the event and understandably declined to participate in it. Later, Angel regretted this decision more than once, but it was too late. As he grew older, Angel's muscles and body became stronger. And here he was now. Walking home with Pirate, Angel involuntarily remembered the times when he returned home from training just like this. How long ago that was, and yet it seemed like yesterday. After graduating from school, Angel moved to the city, intending to leave the province for good. By that time, his grandfather had passed away, and his grandmother often fell ill and could no longer run the household alone. Angel tried to come back every weekend, but desire didn't always coincide with opportunity. City life consumed him, filling his existence with a plethora of problems. Rent, schooling, and finding part-time work in his spare time, all of this required considerable strength and attention, but Angel didn't give up. When his grandmother passed away, he was just finishing medical school. The news of the death of a close and dear person caught him off guard. Returning to his hometown, Angel single-handedly took care of the funeral and all subsequent mourning events. Looking at the fresh mound of earth, he couldn't hold back his tears. After burying his grandmother, Angel inherited the house and returned to the village, where much had changed in his absence. Now only wealthy and influential people settled outside the city. His current neighbors were exactly like that Leon and Sophia of prosperous businessmen who had made their fortune in real estate trading. Considering themselves the masters of life, they always tried to impose their rules on the village. Seeing Angel approaching, Leon stepped out onto the street and beckoned to his neighbor with a finger. The young man approached closer and looked at the businessman with concern. "Listen, Angel, there's something up. While you were away, 3 guys came by asking about you. Did you get into something over there? They seemed mighty suspicious to me. I didn't say anything extra, but at work, people are asking, you know?" Leon asked. "Nah, I didn't get involved in anything. Except for saving a woman this morning. But it's not my fault they almost buried her alive," Angel replied, astonished. Now it was the businessman's turn to be surprised. "You mean that incident, the one they showed on the daytime news? So, do you work at the morgue?" Angel nodded awkwardly, as if he'd been caught doing something shameful. But it was just a job and nothing more. Leon nodded with feigned respect and patted his neighbor on the shoulder. And as soon as Angel headed towards the gate, the businessman rushed back to the house to share this sensational news with his wife. "Sophia, you won't believe it, our neighbor works at the morgue. I always thought he was a bit strange. There you go, and we, businessmen, managers, white-collar workers, and he's, what, not quite like us," Sophia muttered through gritted teeth. Angel approached the gate and opened the latch. "Well, Pirate, this will be your home now. I'll build you a kennel in a few days, but for now, you'll stay here. I'll give you an old fur coat of my grandpa's for bedding. And no chains, of course. You're a good boy, aren't you? Not planning to run back to the city?" Angel asked, showing his dog the property. Pirate looked attentively at his owner and barked in agreement. He definitely liked the setup. What could be better than life in the suburbs, where every corner of the yard smelled of mice, cats, and even rabbits? After feeding the dog, Angel had dinner with the pastries given to him by Camila and lay down on the couch to rest. Some simple TV series was playing, which unintentionally made him nod off. The tiredness from the day's events and the long walk definitely took their toll. Before he knew it, Angel had drifted off to sleep. Pirate lay by the door, curled up in a ball. It was quiet in the village, peaceful. But as soon as one dog barked in their sleep, the whole pack started barking in unison. It was already quite dark outside when there was a loud knock on the door. Angel jerked awake, puzzled as to who could be knocking at such a late hour, and went to open the door. He had no inkling who could be standing on the other side. Unlike his neighbors, Angel didn't have much money, so he didn't fear being robbed. What would someone take from his little house? An old iron stove, a rickety dresser, or a fridge that worked like a tractor during planting season. But when he saw 3 young men in black jackets at the door, he changed his mind completely. Without waiting for an invitation, the uninvited guests barged inside. One of them shoved Angel in the chest and demanded, "So, are you gonna talk, or do we have to squeeze the info out of you like a tick?" "Hey, guys, what's going on? You got the wrong guy or something?" Angel exclaimed in surprise. "Nah, you're the one who's confused. Come on, spit it out quick. What did that woman tell you? Any numbers or clues about the stash? Let's go. Use your brain while you still can," one of the strangers growled. Sensing danger, Angel decided to stand his ground and immediately took a defensive stance. At the same time, Pirate growled, and the gang leader pulled out a folding knife from his pocket. "Don't you dare, you bastard!" Angel shouted and tried to grab the villain's hand to disarm him. A scuffle ensued, in which, due to the cramped space of the hallway, it was impossible to make out anything. Angel fought desperately, as he had been taught in training. Meanwhile, Pirate tore into the attackers, justifying his loud name. At some point, Angel felt a sharp jab in his side and a sudden pain in his ribs. He groaned and slowly slumped to the floor. Pirate growled deeply and immediately shielded his owner with his body. Despite the blood running down the dog's face, he clearly had no intention of ending the fight. "Let's go, forget it. We've stirred up the whole neighborhood. We'll get those damn money anyway," one of the henchmen yelled and was the first to rush to the exit. The boss glanced at the guy lying on the floor and immediately left the house. Staying at the scene was too risky, especially in a village where every other house has a hunter with a double-barrel shotgun ready to blast you with pellets. Angel struggled to get up and crawled over to the stationary city telephone on the table in the hallway. His late grandmother couldn't stand cell phones and only trusted this tried and true means of communication. Drenched in blood, Angel picked up the receiver and, with his weakening hand, dialed the emergency number. All this time, Pirate was by his side, doing his best to help his injured owner, nudging him with his nose and shoulder. Angel wasn't sure why the robbers had come, but he suspected their visit was somehow connected to what had happened at work that morning. As he began to lose consciousness, Angel saw people in white coats leaning over his body, and in blissful relief, he closed his eyes. Pirate stood a little further away, tears frozen in his eyes. Just a few days earlier, a similar vehicle with a red cross on the side had taken away his first owner. And just like that time, the doctors promised to return his kind old grandpa to him, the one he had grown up with in this house. But the elderly surgeon never returned, as he had gone to a completely different place, where crosses and mourning obelisks with full-length post-mortem photographs were everywhere. As they took Angel away, Pirate dashed after the car, trying to grab it with his teeth. The smart and brave dog was afraid of only one thing: being alone again, where memories haunted him endlessly and tormented his consciousness to the point of madness. Angel was lucky. Despite a deep wound in his side, he survived. After performing emergency surgery, the on-call surgeon faced an even more serious problem than the operation itself. Ironically, the wounded man had a very rare blood type, and finding a donor was no easy task. The fourth blood type. Well, what luck. What am I supposed to do with you now? The doctor whispered sadly. Angel's life still hung by a thread, and the successful operation only slightly tipped the scales in his favor. But everything could change in an instant, as medicine is unpredictable. And it depends not only on the skill of the doctors, but also on the luck of the patient. The police, called by neighbors, organized a plan to intercept and pursue the suspects. However, it had little effect. During that time, the villains managed to disappear, leaving only memories and the chaos they caused in Angel's house behind. The next day, news of what had happened spread throughout the area. Where have you ever seen robbers attack an inconspicuous morgue attendant? When Angel's colleague, Casper, showed up for work the next day, his amazement knew no bounds. Well, Angel, quite the achiever, weren't you? Didn't even leave him alone for a day, and already managed to make history. Nicholas just shook his head knowingly. He wasn't in the mood to discuss the young attendant's adventures right now. He himself could end up in the defendant's dock, along with the pathologist and the rich man, for that matter. Why did he ever agree to this scam? They said a mosquito won't hurt you. Falsify a non-existent autopsy report and the case is in the bag. As it turned out, immediately after Laura's incident, her husband was immediately declared missing. A natural toxin was found in the rich woman's blood, which could only harm someone allergic to certain types of food. The substance that triggered Laura's choking fit turned out to be a rather rare type of spice, which was not included in any of the dishes offered on the rich woman's menu. How did the toxin end up in Laura's food? Initially, suspicion fell on Donald himself, who disappeared immediately after his wife's sensational resurrection. At first, no one could shed light on this question, as throughout the entire dinner, Donald was in plain sight and couldn't discreetly add the spice, even if he wanted to. So how did it end up in the food? The investigation of this high-profile case was entrusted to the young and very ambitious investigator, Thomas. Being a person of extraordinary thinking and resourcefulness, he was the first to think of using hidden surveillance cameras installed in the restaurant hall. That's where it was discovered that the cleaner, who was mopping the floors in the kitchen during the preparation of Laura's dishes, was adding spices to the food. But why did you do it, huh? What's the point? Didn't you realize you were committing a crime? Thomas exclaimed. Nina sobbed. If only I knew. Donald played me like a fiddle. 3 kids, husband left. And I was recently diagnosed with an illness, and there's no money for treatment. So Donald proposed a deal. He said he wanted to play a joke, that it would be funny, and promised to give me money for treatment. So I agreed. The investigator looked at the technician with undisguised pity. How could she be the criminal when the cleaner herself turned out to be the victim? Thanks to the efforts of the doctors and well-chosen therapy, Laura was able to leave the hospital ward after just 2 days. As it turned out later, her poisoner, Donald, simply couldn't feel a pulse and decided that his wife had departed to the other world. But in reality, everything turned out to be completely different. When Laura learned that her savior was injured, she immediately went to visit him in the surgical department. Since Angel was still unconscious, he simply couldn't know that the woman he had saved had decided to visit him. It was Laura who suggested that the attackers were accomplices of her husband, Donald. You see, shortly before the poisoning incident, I told my husband that I was filing for divorce. And the money kept in the home safe, I secretly moved to the bank, with the safety deposit box number and the access code. But Donald didn't know about it, so he sent his thugs to Angel, Thinking he knew the details, Laura explained to the investigator. Thomas visibly perked up. Can I know the reason for the divorce? Was it a spontaneous decision or a conscious one? The businesswoman smiled. Of course, it was conscious. Donald appeared in my life immediately after my father's death, and we met by chance in the cemetery. Our relatives' graves turned out to be next to each other. It's silly, probably, to meet in such places, but I didn't think it would go so far. Just a casual acquaintance. And look how it turned out. And what happened next? The investigator inquired. Well, what happened next? We were married for 2 years. Donald was like a different person. Immediately became so authoritative and harsh. Money started to disappear. And he would blame the maid or refer to my poor memory. I often go on business trips, you see. Once I came back early, wanted to surprise him, bought a gift, wine, candles. And he's entertaining himself with my best friend. Some romance, huh? With bitterness, Laura recounted. The investigator nodded sympathetically and tried to steer the conversation in a different direction. Tell me, where could we find Donald? Well, of course, we've put out a search for him. But he's not so foolish as to fall into a trap in the heat of the moment. He's cold and calculating, it seems, and such people rarely make mistakes. Laura pondered. The resentment towards her husband was so strong that she began to recall all the places where he might appear. Finally, she remembered something significant. You know, there's this place. As I mentioned, we met at the cemetery. So, Donald, he visits his grandfather's grave every week. What he does there, I don't know. But sometimes he comes twice a week, regardless of the season and weather, you understand? Thomas's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. Here it was, a chance to catch the criminal. But how to organize a stakeout in a place that was very well observed? And anyway, could operatives spend days lurking in the cemetery? And who would handle other cases? Then an interesting thought came to the investigator's mind. What if we set up a camera opposite the necessary grave? When Donald shows up, we'll notify the rapid response team, and they'll apprehend him right away. The idea was so well received by all the participants in the operation that they decided to put it into action immediately. The tiny camera allowed the police to conduct covert surveillance on the target without the risk of being discovered. Now all that was left was to wait for the fish to come to its favorite spot and get caught in the net. While her husband was being hunted, Laura tried to help the injured paramedic, Angel. By a strange twist of fate, she happened to have the blood of the required blood type. Although, truth be told, she didn't even suspect it. At first, the doctors were against the transfusion. Listen, but this is too dangerous. You yourself have barely escaped death recently. Do you really need more blood loss? But Laura persisted, showing remarkable strength of will and character. It was only thanks to her decision that Angel was saved. Throughout this time, Martin and his granddaughter Camila fervently prayed for the boy. And Robin, now and then, wished good health to the kind uncle. At the same time, no one knew that Laura had secretly submitted blood samples for DNA analysis. The results had to be awaited for about a week, but when Laura received the official conclusion, she couldn't contain her disappointment. According to the specialists, Angel was not her relative and could not theoretically be one. Well, there's your fourth blood group, she muttered ironically. What was I hoping for? Silly me. Is there really no one else in our town with the fourth blood group? Absurd, just absurd, Laura whispered with irony. After the transfusion, the paramedic slowly but surely recovered. Now that visitors were allowed into the room, Martin and Camilla almost daily visited him. One can only guess at the effort it took for the girl to make her way up to the third floor with a wheelchair. "Don't worry, Angel, you'll pull through. The main thing is that your internal organs weren't affected, and everything else will heal," the janitor said. The boy smiled gratefully and looked at Camilla. She really was a pretty girl, what can I say? Strong, sturdy. The soul rejoices and aches with pain at the same time. What did she do to deserve such punishment? Who knows? Go figure it out. Yeah, Angel, almost forgot to tell you. They caught that scoundrel Donald. Identified him from the hidden camera footage. Not even the wig he wore could help him disguise himself. Imagine, he had a hiding spot at his grandfather's grave. A small container with ill-gotten gains and a passport under a different name. And, get this, the grave itself was fake. Donald's grandfather is actually buried elsewhere. That's your poisoner for you. Planned everything, studied everything, but got caught on the details. Martin remembered it only after his release. Angel's joy knew no bounds. Truth be told, he still had the image of that villain in his mind, like back in the morgue when he, using his wife's hidden illness to his advantage, wanted to bury her alive. A week later, when Angel was allowed to get out of bed, he started strolling in the hospital courtyard with Camilla, Robin, and the pirate. Watching this touching scene, patients and medical staff couldn't help but smile and shed tears of joy. A pale, skinny boy leaning on a crutch, a homeless boy, and a girl in a wheelchair, holding a huge dog on a leash. And soon, a fifth member joined their walk, Laura. Even though Angel wasn't the business lady's brother, she still considered him as such, and how could she not, when they were blood relatives? You know, Angel, I was actually an orphan, and I did have a brother. They separated us when we were kids. The director only confessed yesterday and told me his surname. Nowhere to go. His family dumped him in a nursing home. Grandpa turned out to be quite nasty. I'm the only one who visits him. The director spilled everything to me. You might be surprised, but my real brother was a hero. He was a firefighter. Rescued a boy from a fire, but when he went back for his parents, the beams gave way. They buried him under them. With a voice trembling with excitement, Laura said, "Sad story. May he rest in peace. A real hero." Angel said sadly. Laura smiled. "Do you know what that boy's name was?" "No, what?" "Robin," Laura whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "What? What did you say? Robin? Could it really be?" Angel exclaimed. And immediately he placed his hand on the gauze bandage on his side. The wound was sore and hadn't fully healed. During the interrogation, Donald didn't resist and quickly gave up his accomplices. Now, the criminal gang faced a hefty prison sentence for fraud, attempted murder, and inflicting grievous bodily harm. After recovering, Angel returned to the morgue where a promotion awaited him and a new boss to replace the dismissed Nicholas. The pirate settled in the new owner's house and loved him with all his heart. And Camilla and Angel planned to get married, also to formalize guardianship over Robin. When love is in the heart, they simply couldn't do otherwise. But most of all, Martin was overjoyed, as he couldn't dream of a better husband for his granddaughter. For her part, Laura also made her contribution to the cause by paying for Camilla's surgery at one of the country's best medical centers. According to the specialists, the girl may not be able to dance, but she can move around with a cane. Although, smirking cunningly, Martin says, "We'll have to wait and see about that." You never know what miracles happen at a wedding when the feast is for the whole world.